Good evening to both. And let's begin with the Premier spending the week across the Pacific. Danielle Smith is visiting Japan and South Korea on a mission to expand energy and agriculture markets, spending the past few days in Sapporo, where the 45th anniversary of the Alberta-Hokkaido partnership was recognized. The Premier also promoting high-speed rail after taking a train from Tokyo to Sapporo that tops out at 320 kilometers an hour. The Alberta government, of course, working on a passenger rail master plan that is expected to be released this summer. Marg, word of this 8-day trip came in a news release issued Friday, the very day of indicated departure. Surprised there wasn't something earlier, given this is being highlighted as a trade mission of sorts.
Yeah, it is surprising because it takes a long time to book the meetings and that thing, that kind of thing. So I suspect it was in the wind. So I don't know why it was just so last minute announced, but I guess that's what it is.
John, is this a trade mission that warrants the Premier's participation?
I think so. And I mean, both in terms of an efficacy of getting things done by sending the highest levels here in Alberta over there. And I think in terms of the optics of showing Albertans that the government takes this seriously enough to actually send the Premier over there to do a lot of the negotiations herself. I think that was a good call. And I dare say most Albertans are probably, or there's probably more support for this kind of trip of sending the Premier to establish these kinds of trade relations rather than some of the other trips perhaps down south that she was taking a few months ago.
Yeah. So, Marg, what do you feel Albertans should expect in terms of this particular trip generating results? Is there anything tangible that could potentially come of this?
Yeah, I think there certainly should be some agreements reached and signed, perhaps. Now with TMX online, it's easier to make some deals, certainly with Asia, than it was a couple years ago. So I think we can expect her to come back with some signed agreements, perhaps for LNG or oil and gas, because LNG in BC is going to proceed. And for agriculture, yeah, that's pretty important as well. And I would expect she'll come back with some kind of signed agreement as well. And I agree with John. It sends a good signal rather than dealing with the United States, who has become fairly problematic to deal with lately.
John, in posting photos of the trip, the Premier, including pics on the Hayabusa high-speed train, indicating if Alberta had something similar, travel between Edmonton and Calgary would take less than an hour. To what degree do you see this maybe foreshadowing expectations for the government's own passenger rail master plan?
So my immediate response is perhaps a bit cynical, like I'll believe it when I actually see shovels in the ground. I mean, high-speed rail has been a dream in this province for decades now. On the other hand, one of the factors that makes it perhaps more likely this time around is there is this appetite domestically for big projects as a way to deal with the economic uncertainty caused by the erratic behavior from the United States. And so, now we're talking about cross-country economic corridors, cross-country pipelines. I think now would sort of be an opportune moment to talk about a provincial mega project like high-speed rail on the Calgary-Edmonton corridor, because, it would create economic activity, it would create jobs. And there's that kind of, dream big, think big, act big attitude that Albertans and indeed Canadians more broadly have in this time. So I think it is perhaps more likely now than it has been previously.
Okay, on that point of thinking big, acting big, next up, the goal of removing trade barriers.
A challenge that's been laid down across the country of free trade in Canada, full free trade in Canada, across Canada, by Canada Day. And I don't know if we'll make that goal, but Nova Scotia's all in.
The premiers of Ontario, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick signing an agreement allowing goods and workers to move more freely between the three provinces, Ontario, Nova Scotia as well, also tabling legislation aimed at removing barriers on trade. John, Doug Ford hailing this a historic step forward. So how much of a first step is it if only three provinces are taking part?
It is a big step, but most importantly, it is a step, not a destination. And these three provinces, in many ways, this makes the most sense. This is sort of the low-hanging fruit to get this going. So, I mean, I don't want to take the wind out of their sails too much, because it is an important first step to get the ball rolling. But this is an easy first step, and really just a first step in what will be a long journey to dismantle trade barriers that have taken decades. I mean, over 100 years to emerge into their current form. So this is a long-term project, but this is a good first step.
And Marg, on that point of being a long-term project, we heard the clip of Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston driving the message of full free trade across Canada by Canada Day. Wishful thinking? How realistic is that from your standpoint?
I don't think full free trade by July 1st is realistic, but good on him for a bold goal. But I think it's important, as John said, it's a start, it's a journey. I think for Alberta, let's start talking to BC, because there's a lot of ridiculous barriers that go between us and BC, and that would be a good start. And then maybe work with the other two Western provinces and, small steps. But, if there's a will by all the premiers, there's no reason why we can't have a good start by July 1st.
John, surprised Alberta was not at that table, that there was no mention of our province?
No, I'm not surprised at all. Like I said, these three provinces, this is not really a surprise. If the first, deal was going to be inked, it makes a lot of sense that it was from these three provinces, like Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. Their trade is heavily reliant upon Ontario as a trading partner. So this makes a lot of sense. I think, the fact that Alberta and BC can't sort out the trade of wine across the border. Why is it that every time I go to a winery in BC and bring back, a case of wine from wineries that I visited, that I'm, and not paying taxes on it, that I'm technically violating the law? It's the fact that Alberta and BC haven't sorted out the wine issue, is still kind of ridiculous. And so, yeah, no, I'm not surprised that Alberta wasn't at the table. Like I said, this is low hanging fruit. Danielle Smith's busy in Asia doing other important things. I think, as Marg said, let the Western provinces will sort of probably get together and figure out their own thing. And we'll get these regional blocks before we get sort of a more fully fleshed out national trade strategy.
And maybe on Marg, that point of a fully fleshed out strategy, how do you see the outcome of the federal election playing into progress and removal of these trade barriers?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think there are some people sitting back and seeing where it lands before they make some decisions. And maybe rightfully so, because you don't want to be making some deals and then have them changed in a week or two. So I think after the election, there'll be a lot more talk and incentive, perhaps, from whichever government is formed to have these talks and to make it easier for provinces.
The federal election is now less than a week away, and advance voting drew millions to polling stations over the long weekend.
Expected a lot of voters to come out, and I think it's the crucial turning point for Canada.
Yes, everybody knows it's a very important election this year.
Now in Calgary, some polling stations reported hour-long waits. Elections Canada says advance voting on Friday alone saw 2 million people roughly casting ballots across the country. That is a new record. Now, John, heavy voting during the advance polls. Just today, Elections Canada estimating 7.3 million voted over the 4 days. That's a 25% increase over 2021. What should that be taken as a sign of?
I think it's a sign of engagement. Those were 4 very good days for Canadian democracy. Every election, there's this perennial concern that that voter turnout just is going to continue to decline. And this election is bucking what has generally been a long-term trend of declining participation in elections. So I think this is very good for Canadian democracy. This is a good sign that people have tuned in and paid attention to what a lot of folks have been saying is an election for our times.
So, Marg, what do you see driving the high voter turnout at the advance polls?
I would agree that it's high voter engagement. Probably the Trump tariffs are the number one. thing that's certainly threatening our country. So people are paying attention. We voted on Friday and saw the same thing. It was about a 45-minute wait going in, and it's probably about an hour and a half by the time we went out. So lots of people coming forward. I think it's awesome.
John, how do you see last week's official debates maybe influencing this final week of the campaign?
I don't really. I like the debate. I think it was constructive. There was good discussion. The format worked well, especially versus the debate from the last election. But I don't think there was any new information injected into the information environment, so to speak. And so I don't really see it changing anybody's minds, leaving aside the usual raft of partisans calling into call-in shows after the debate, pretending they were undecided and saying that they were convinced. I think the one sort of little bit of news stuff that came out of the debate is we saw perhaps a softer Pierre Poilievre. I think that did him quite well. But I think it was probably too little, too late. If that version of Pierre Poilievre showed up when Justin Trudeau resigned, and he continued to, look more stately and less like an opposition politician, maybe we'd be looking at a different set of numbers this time around. But yeah, I think it was just a little too late.
Marg, you know well what it's like pushing in the late stages of an election. What's going to be key for the parties in getting out the vote?
I think exactly that. Even if you look at the polls and you're pretty comfortable that you're going to do well in the election, you still run like you're not. And every vote matters, and every vote's going to really matter in this election. So I think this week there'll be lots of pulling the vote, and especially the day of. And yeah, every vote matters. So you don't stop till the last minute.
John, you both have brought up the mid-election polling. Those polls continue to fluctuate. The latest from Nanos puts the Liberals ahead of the Conservatives. I believe it's by 6 points now, down a couple from a day or so ago. With less than a week to go, how much do you feel Albertans should read into those numbers?
Well, I think at a national level, the Liberals are probably, looking at a fairly strong minority government. I still think that a Liberal majority and a Conservative minority are technically within sort of the realm of possibility. But I think sort of the national picture, there's a pretty good chance that there'll be a Liberal minority. But for the Alberta specific picture, I think. Depending on which poll you look, the Liberals tend to be sort of high 20s. I would just knock 5% off, like 5 percentage points off of that, because there has been this trend in polling in Alberta, both provincial polling and the Alberta subsample of federal polling, that has tended to overestimate both the Liberals and the New Democrats and underestimate the Conservatives. And so what Albertans should take from that is that it's how many seats the Liberals walk away with in Alberta is quite sensitive. Like there's a bit of a threshold. Like at 14% in 2019, they got shut out. At 16% in 2021, they won 2 seats. And then in 2015, at 25%, they won 4. So, if they are at 27%, they could win 4, they could win 6. But if they're only at 22%, they'll probably win 2, but would they win 4? I'm not so sure. So it's quite sensitive, and there's a bit of this threshold for the Liberals in Alberta, where the relationship between the number of seats that they win versus their popular vote share isn't linear. It's sort of it rises slowly, and then it shoots up and then sort of levels off again after that.
Okay, Marg, maybe last 20, 30 seconds to you. NDP's Jagmeet Singh in Edmonton this evening. What's to be read into where the party leaders visit in this final week of the election?
I think right now he's just spending his time in ridings where they have a decent chance of taking it, or he can pump up the votes. So he'll go to the 2 likely that are here in Edmonton that have a chance to to win. I think he's not worrying about other ones where there's no chance anymore, and just to hang on to what he's got, or at least a few more seats than what's predicted.
John, Oilers are back home for Game 3 on Friday. Good chance maybe then that one Mark Carney might be visiting Edmonton on that day?
Yeah, I think that's probably a safe bet. He likes to play up his hockey connection. So, yeah, I think anything, parties will do all sorts of things to try and drive up engagement with the political process.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We'll have to leave it there for time.
Yeah.
Good to see you both. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks,
Good
Michael.
to be here.